Hi, it's Jade from the Saddle Bank, and in this video we're going to be looking at points of the saddle. So we're going to identify the different parts of the saddle and what they do or what they mean and how that affects you as a rider and how it affects your horse. So we're going to start with the outer part of the saddle and the top at the front. So this is the pommel, and that's essentially the front of the saddle. It sits above and over the withers, so you need to make sure you've got plenty of clearance there. You then work your way backwards so you've got the twist here. Now, in the UK, we don't often deal with a twist in the saddle. It's not something that we often think about, but in America that's really, really important. And essentially it just means this part of the saddle here, how wide or how narrow that is. Moving further backwards, you've got the seat, and that's essentially where your seat bones will sit on the saddle and your centre of gravity will be with the horse. Moving further backwards, you've got the cantle. Now, cantles can be different shapes, different sizes, depending on the type of saddle and the discipline. So we've got a GP saddle here, so this has got a round cantle, a fairly open seat. But if you're riding in dressage, you may find you've got quite a deep cantle, or if you're using a jump saddle, it might be quite flat and also quite square for jumping. Now, working our way down, you've got this skirt here. Now, this is a small flap essentially that covers your stirrup bar, which you can see under there, and that's called the skirt. Underneath here, you've also got your D-ring, so you can attach martingales and things like that. You've got here the nail head or the pin head or whatever you want to call it. Essentially, that's where brands put their nail through, and it just tells you what brand the saddle is. Now, moving our way down the flap, so you've got your main flap here. I'll just move the saddle back slightly. And you've got your knee roll. So this is the knee roll, and that's the padded bit at the front that's a bit more comfortable for you as a rider. You've got your stirrup leather keeper here. So stirrup leathers will come down here, but you have that long tail bit of the stirrup leathers, and that just slips through there to keep it nice, neat and tidy and out the way for you. Now, if we lift the main flap up, we can see under here what we got. So this one's got Velcro knee blocks, so they can be popped on and popped off as you wish, and obviously positioned to suit you. And it also does have a Velcro area here for calf blocks, and we do have the blocks, we've just taken them off. Now, some saddles have fixed knee and thigh blocks, depending on the brand and what the saddle is. Quite a lot of jump saddles have fixed ones just to give riders that extra support. Now, here you've got your girth straps, which are also known as billets, and they are attached to the webbing, and the webbing goes through the tree of the saddle. And you can often have different adjustments depending on the brand and things like that as to where the girth straps are positioned. So you'll often find for cob type horses you may have more girth straps to give you more choice, often with point and balance straps as well. Now, as you can see here, this is the point of the tree. So the whole tree structure is essentially the skeleton of the saddle, and it essentially is the shape of the saddle, and here it comes down into the point. Now, that sits in the point pocket, which is that part there, and this strap that comes out of there is known as the point strap. This would be your, technically strap 1, but that would be your point strap. You usually have a strap on here, which would be strap 2, so you have 1, 2, and that would be your neutral position, and then you've got the back strap here, which is a balance strap. Now, it depends on your horse and how the saddle fits and what sort of stabilisation they need as to whether you're going to be using a point strap or a balance strap, but you should also always start using the middle two, essentially strap 1 and 2, because that's your point strap. Now, it's really important to note, unless recommended by your saddle fitter, you should never ever use the point strap and strap 1 together, because that's going to anchor that saddle down at the front, and it's going to put all the weight in the front of the saddle, and it's going to become quite uncomfortable for your horse. So you should never use the first 2 straps together. Now, very briefly looking at the front of the saddle. So here we've got a stitch line, as you can see, down the front, and that would be the gusset, that would be the front gusset. And some saddles you see will have like a half gusset here. Now, half gussets are great for horses with a bit of atrophy or muscle wastage behind the wither, or those for very high withers that need a bit of a lift. This particular saddle is a high wither model, and that's obviously got a front gusset, but front gussets are quite common now on most saddles. So do have a look at your saddle and just notice if you've got that stitching line or not, because some saddles don't have it at all. And whilst we're talking about gussets, let's talk about the rear gusset. Now, for a high wither horse, you're going to have a deeper rear gusset at the back, and that's just going to help balance the saddle out. If you've got a low withered cob type horse, you're going to have quite slim, neat panels, and that's going to keep the saddle nice and close and low to the horse, because if it's perched too high, it's going to have more of a tendency to roll and slide around. So if you've got a cob, you're going to be looking for nice, slim panels. If you've got a high wither horse, you want a deep rear gusset, a front gusset, just to give it that lift over those withers. And if you've got an average height with a horse, you're going to be looking somewhere in between. Usually a 2.5 inch gusset is quite common on a standard wither horse. Now, looking at the saddle from underneath, these are the panels. And these are what sits on your horse's back, and essentially we need this to spread all of your weight as evenly as possible across the horse. Now, panels can be made of different materials. These ones are flocked, which means it's stuffed with wool flocking, sheep flocking. You can also have foam panels. You can also have flare, which is essentially airbags, and they're pumped up with a pump, and you can balance them out and everything like that. But it's very important with flare that you do get a flare qualified fitter who specialises in those, because if you put too much air in it, it's going to be like rock hard. So and you'll find that as a rider that you do really bounce out of it, because it's literally hard as rock for your horse. So what's right for you and your horse depends on the horse and what the horse prefers as well. Some horses only like flocking, some only like flare, some don't really have a preference. So it depends entirely on your particular horse. But these are your panels, and this is the gullet channel. Now, the gullet channel obviously is there because your horse's spine needs room all the way down the channel, so it doesn't impede on the spine, because the spine's obviously and just either side of it, or the spinous processes, it's a very sensitive area for the horse. So you do want to make sure that you've got a good spinal clearance, but also at the same time you don't want to be too wide, because the saddle usually has rails. I mean, this one is a plastic tree, so the whole skeleton of the saddle will be plastic, but most wooden saddles have rails, and you need to ensure that the panels actually cover those rails. So the rails would usually be around here, coming down, depending on if you've got a cob tree or a thoroughbred tree, etc. Really important to just make sure that your panels are in really good condition. The flocking, if you've got flock panels, they're nice and evenly flocked. There's no lumps, gaps and bumps and things like that in there. And then you've obviously got this flap here underneath, and that's known as a sweat flap, because essentially that would be the one that touches the horse if you weren't using a numnah or saddle pad. So I hope you found this video really, really useful. If you've got any questions, drop them in the comments and I'll be happy to help you. And if you are looking to buy a saddle, make sure you go and check out the Saddle Bank at thesaddlebank.com. Thanks for watching.